you have a passion for music. How charming. It's rare to find such young girls who enjoy the opera. Well, I frowned, setting my cup of jasmine tea back down on the saucer. The face of Reginald Whittier stared down at me, proud and haughty. This was before he had drunk himself to death. To be honest, I've never been to the opera before. It sounds intriguing, though. Oh my. I apologize, Tawa. I should have thought. Obviously, going to the opera is something of a luxury. I've become so used to our conversations, I almost thought. She didn't say it. She would never say it, but I knew what she was thinking. I almost thought you were like me. But I wasn't. We would never have been equals. We were far apart, not only in age, but in social standing. I sank down into my chair, as low as good manners would permit me, and looked at my lap. My cheeks turned light pink. Lady Whittier, however, was not to be deterred. She smiled courageously, clapping her ropey old hands together, like a fairy godmother might before granting a wish. Well, we'll have to rectify that. Giudita Pasta is currently starring as Medea in Covent Garden, and I have been meaning to attend for quite some time. There is nothing more rousing than Italian opera, and Medea's story is so tragic. I'm sure you will enjoy it. But I couldn't accompany you, madam. The money alone. Money is no object. I have enough money to be getting on with. Not so much as once I had, but enough. And it doesn't make me happy. Introducing a lovely young girl like you to the world of opera, however, would make me very happy indeed. I always wanted to take my husband and son, but they never appreciated the arts like I do. They said it was fanciful, stuff for women. They didn't give it a chance. They never realized just how passionate it could be. Well, if you're so sure, I wouldn't want to intrude. It's no intrusion. You can never intrude upon me, my dear Tawa. Over the last few months, I have grown very fond of you. And Lady Whittier smiled one of her calm, reassuring smiles, which led me to believe this really was fine, and that the daughter of a housemaid really could go to Covent Garden and watch Giudita Pasta with a noble woman. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. Especially the arts of making lesbian dating sim games. Send them my way, Tail! I want to play more! They are important. So I attended Medea with Lady Whittier and watched as Giudita Pasta threw her all into the role, that of a tormented woman driven mad with love who murdered her own children. I think Medea might have been a bit of an intense opera to submit such a young girl to, but I loved it. Just as Lady Whittier said, it was passionate. It made me think in violin, though I couldn't understand the words, because it was all in Italian. It touched something inside my heart. Though the tragic events unfolded on a stage, and I knew they weren't real, I felt myself being drawn into it regardless. It must have been because of the music. That was what hooked me. I've been in love with the opera ever since. After Medea, Lady Whittier took me to see plays, concerts, and even the ballet, but there is nothing I remember more fondly than the opera. I met so many colorful characters, and they have all stayed with me ever since. Semiramide? I don't know. Cenerentola, Tristan, and Isolde. Medea is a great play. I wouldn't know. I've never seen it before. Or heard of it before, even. But I am forgetting myself. My mother, as you might expect, was delighted by this development. She was positively giddy at the thought of her little girl going to the opera with Lady Whittier. She would kiss my cheeks, pat me on the head, and say, I always knew you were a charming girl, and you've certainly worked your magic on Lady Whittier. She loves you. She just wants some company, that's all. Yes, but don't you realize the significance of this? I get to expand my knowledge of the Italian arts? That too, but if she likes you this much, our futures will be secured. I failed to see how. Think about it logically, dear. Her will. What might she leave you in her will? This seemed positively shameless to me, but my mother was just being practical. She wasn't a conniving woman, and neither was she trying to swindle Lady Whittier. This was all down to the machinations of fate. And if fate had sent her a gift horse, my mother saw no reason to look it in the mouth. She murders 4 separate people and yet is portrayed as the victim? Oh, jeez. I mean, depending how those murders took place, I can maybe see why, but that seems a bit of overkill. Literally. With murdering 4 people and still being a victim? Ugh. I could see she was being sensible now, but I bristled with indignation at the time. I hated to think that I might somehow be complicit in a scheme to defraud Lady Whittier of her money. Her husband and son had already bled her dry. I wanted no part in it. So what if she left me anything in her will? I wouldn't accept it. I would refuse. I've always had a lot of pride. It's complicated, but a great play nonetheless. That's good to know. I might have to look up information about it later. That is, until Lady Whittier showed me the violin. It was shortly after we saw Medea together when Lady Whittier, perhaps inspired by a sudden burst of nostalgia, began to tell me a story. When I was younger, around your age, or perhaps a year or so older, I wanted to be a musician myself. I blinked at Lady Whittier over my cup of tea, fingers threaded oh so demurely through the handle. After taking tea with Lady Whittier for so long, I had learnt the correct way to hold my utensils, and I was very prim and proper about my manners. I was awfully snobby, despite coming from such a poor family. Did you want to write an opera like Medea? Who, me? Write an opera? Goodness gracious, no. I'm too English. Perhaps you have a point. Lady Whittier sighed, peering at her reflection within her teacup. Composition is not a suitable pastime for women. That's what I was told from an early age. It would cause too much excitement, unbalance the humors. Oh no, I never composed. But you could play? Yes, I did play. My instrument of choice was the violin. Oh, how lovely. Violins are so elegant. I thought so too. I was inspired by a portrait we had in our home of a young girl in a white dress holding a fiddle. The girl in the picture looked so divine, I wanted to be like her too. I begged and pleaded my father for a violin of my own in a most unladylike manner. My father was a bit perturbed by my earnestness and, thinking it be a passing fancy, refused. I was devastated. At some point, however, he must have had a change of heart. After a trip to Italy, he returned home with the most unexpected gift. Your very own violin? That's right, my very own violin. It was a pretty little object, made in Cremona. Lady Whittier smiled, perhaps expecting the significance of this would go over my head, and explained further. That is where all the best violins are made. Stradivari himself hailed from Cremona, though this wasn't as Stradivarius. Nevertheless, it served me well and made my girlhood very happy indeed. Oh goodness! I, quite forgetting myself and all flustered with excitement, clasped my hands together. I wanted so badly to see her violin it was like a physical ache. It hurt. I believe this is the only time in my life I've ever pleaded with anybody else. I couldn't help myself. Do you still have it? Do you? Do you? Lady Whittier didn't seem displeased by my questioning. If anything, she was amused. She chuckled, and her face was so joyous she looked 10, no, 20 years younger. It made me wonder, as I watched her, whether she had made a similar expression upon receiving the violin from her father more than half a century ago. As a matter of fact, I do still have it. It's worth a pretty penny now, but I could never sell it. That violin was my dearest friend as a young girl, and it has been my most steadfast companion throughout my adult life. And do you still play it? Sadly, no. I couldn't do it justice now. Not with these gnarled fingers. I'm sure it would sound beautiful all the same. But Lady Whittier shook her head. Trying to play it now would be a disgrace to the music I used to be able to make. I wouldn't want to taint the memory of my childhood days. I'm sorry. I hung my head, disappointed. I didn't know what to say, and I had so wanted to hear Lady Whittier play her violin, too. But that wasn't the end of the matter. In fact, it was only just the beginning. However, just because I can't play my violin, that doesn't mean nobody else can. What? I stared, hardly daring to believe. For a few moments, I think I quite forgot how to blink. I sat there, dumbly, frozen like a doll. Then you don't... That is correct. Why don't you try it, Tawa? But, that violin is precious to you. And it will be even more precious if another little girl is able to find joy in it like I did. I hate to think of it being locked away without any purpose, only capable of gathering dust. Instruments are created to be played, and you have such long, lovely fingers. If anybody was made to play a violin, you were. But I have never played before. Then I shall teach you. You really could? Though it has been several years, I remember the basics. And Lady Whittier smiled, the corners of her eyes crumbling. I have always wanted to share my passion with somebody else. Isn't that what love is all about? I didn't say a word. I couldn't. She was right, I think. She had never been more right about anything else. Despite Lady Whittier's words, I was not a natural violinist. In the beginning, the noises I coaxed out of her violin were hideous. They brought to mind not the elegant soaring of a bird on a draught of wind, but of cats screeching and yowling on rooftops. Still, I was not to be deterred, and neither was Lady Whittier. The violin gave us something new to bond over, and we laughed together at my failures and celebrated my minor successes. Over time, my playing became better and better until, after a year or so of almost daily lessons, I was able to procure actual music from that violin. I can't tell you how happy I felt when I was first able to complete my first proper piece of music, Corelli's La Folia, if you are interested, without a single mistake. I was so happy I could have cried. In fact, I think Lady Whittier did cry a little bit. Her rheumy old eyes beaded with sentimental tears, and she wiped them away with a handkerchief. I pretended that I hadn't seen. I think it might have been embarrassing for her. But I knew how much that violin meant to her, and music, too. I could tell, and it warmed my heart. Excuse me. I spent several years with Lady Whittier, coming to her home every day while my mother set about her work. Time passed, the seasons changed, and we grew closer and closer, like a real grandmother and granddaughter. As I grew taller, Lady Whittier complimented me. She said I was growing up to be a very handsome girl indeed. In turn, I made Lady Whittier presents for her birthday each year, a lavender stuffed pillow or a hand-sewn tea cozy. They weren't good presents by any stretch of the imagination, despite my long, slender fingers.
Do I need to get you a lavender stuffed pillow now?
No, I do not need a lavender stuffed pillow, but thank you. I've always been hopeless at sewing, but Lady Whittier delighted in them. She used that pillow every day until she... Well, it happened around the time of my 14th birthday. Lady Whittier fell ill. Oh no! Don't make me cry, game. I'm not prepared. I'm not sure what it was she suffered from, but it had been a very cold winter. Too cold, perhaps, for her constitution. She had to retire to her bed, and there she lay for several weeks, growing grayer and skinnier. Her body withered away, and even her hair seemed to thin. It was almost as though she was disappearing like mist, right before my very eyes. A physician came to tend her, but he had no advice to give other than bracing sea air. Sadly, she was far too ill to go to the seaside. Her mates worried that an attempt to move her would worsen her condition. Yeah, thanks, physician. That was real helpful. Maybe they also feared, not illogically, because she really was unwell, that the slightest touch would break some crucial component inside her, and she would never recover. I sat by her bedside during this period, and held her hand when permitted. Her claw-like fingers had seized up even further, and her nails dug into the backs of my hands, so it hurt. Thanks, Mr. Redbeard. Appreciated. She blinked up at me with rheumy eyes, pale blue, perpetually watery, and tried to smile. It looked like even smiling hurt. Tawa, thank you for coming to see me. It's no problem. You don't need to thank me. But I must. I can't imagine time with a sickly old lady is fun for a pretty young girl like you. Lady Whittier laughed. It sounded dry and wheezy. You're of the age where you should be courting young men, not whiling your time away with me. Don't say that. Don't be silly. I shook my head. My throat started to convulse. I want to spend time with you. You're important to me. Tawa, you're such a sweet thing. I apologize. Don't apologize. I'm sure you'll be all right. That's what I told her, though I'd never been less sure about anything in my life. Still, I had to try. I could hardly tell her she was going to die. I didn't want her to die, not Lady Whittier. She had grown to mean so much to me over the years, and had done so much for me, and I think it was not only for her sake, but my own, that I tried to convince her of her good health. It's probably just a cold. We'll give it time, and it'll go away again, and you'll be right as rain. I tried to sound sure of my diagnosis, but my voice trembled. It was obvious I was scared. I knew that she wasn't going to make it, and Lady Whittier knew too. She smiled at me kindly, the wrinkles at the corners of her mouth folding in on one another, and squeezed my hand. It was almost like she was trying to console me. Thank you, Tawa. I think I feel a touch better now. But that was a lie. Lady Whittier was selfless right until the end. She always put the welfare of others before herself. That was why her husband had seen fit to go out and get drunk every night, and why her son, if I even met her son, I swear I'll give him a good talking to, bled her dry of her life's savings until she had only sawdust left. She was too selfless. Maybe that was what killed her in the end, though the doctor said it was respiratory problems. She just kept giving and giving and giving until she had nothing left to give. Even in her final moments, she was there for me. She only had one request to make of me during those troubled weeks, fraught with anxiety, while I watched over her and tried to stem my own tears. Tawa, dear, I don't want to impose on you, but it's fine. You can ask anything of me, and I'll do it. It was true, too. She could have told me to bite off the tip of my own tongue, and I would have complied in a heartbeat if I thought it might make her better. It wouldn't, of course, but one can always hope. Well then, as you know, I've always loved hearing you play the violin. There is nothing purer in this world than music, and the music you played brought me joy like nothing else. But I'm no professional. There are others, many others, who are far more talented than I am. There are always others more talented than we are, Tawa, but I don't care about that. I like hearing you play because you are you, and you're dear to me. Lady Whittier's withered old fingers impressed themselves softly against the back of my hand, brushing my skin. I shivered. You're like the granddaughter I never had. The granddaughter I always wanted, in fact. You are my beloved granddaughter, and these last few years spent with you have been the happiest years of my life. Please, I just want to hear you play one last time. Lady Whittier. I had never heard her sound so defeated before. Was it a last request? Had she already given in to her fate? I bit my lower lip. The color drained from my face. For a few moments, I childishly thought about refusing. If I didn't play, I reasoned, she wouldn't be able to die. She couldn't. Instead, she would hang on, and then she would be able to hear me play as much as she wanted, whenever she wanted, and she sat in the parlor drinking tea in a warm, sunny afternoon. But I knew there was no time for that. She had no time left. The grandfather clock in the corner of her room ticked the seconds away slowly. One less second Lady Whittier had on this earth. The cold was in her bones. It was eating her away from the inside, turning her internal organs into sand. This was all she had left. These last few fleeting moments were where she pleaded with me, her honorary granddaughter, to give her some comfort in her final moments. Nobody else had given anything to her before. They had been too selfish, more concerned with themselves than this proud, noble woman. I knew I had to do it, though my eyes were filling with tears and my chest hurt. I was the only one who could. All right, I will play for you. Oh, Taoa, my dear child. And her smile was so serene, her eyes so soft, that it almost made this moment of tragedy seem like something beautiful. The final act of an opera. Oh, she's so cute! And so I took up my violin and played. Oh, this music is so pretty. Oops. Okay, turn it up just a little bit. Just for this section of the game, I want it turned up, because this is such a pretty song. My fingers felt strangely cold, despite the warm weather, and I fumbled with the bow a few times, but I tried my best. I had to. I owed Lady Whittier that much after everything she had done for me. Her home had been my home away from home, and she had been just as dear to me as any relative. In fact, I think I was even closer with her than I was my own mother. I tried to pour all my feelings into my playing, clumsy though it was. I just wanted to let her know how much she meant to me in her final, dying moments. How much I loved her. How much I hoped, though I knew it was probably futile, that she would get better, that she would survive. I needed her after all. I think I needed her even more than she needed me. I hadn't realized how lonely my life had been until she came into it. And now she was going to leave. Exit stage right. I think, while I was playing the violin, tears started to come to my eyes. I couldn't help myself, but still, I continued to play. I tried to play one of Lady Whittier's favorite, more complex violin pieces. Paganini's 20th Caprice in D major. Okay. Now we can turn that back down. Lady Whittier died that night. I didn't find out until the next morning when I went to Lady Whittier's home with my mother. I think I had known, though, even as I walked across the cobblestone streets with my mother, that this would be it. The end. I would never see her again. Cat? Doesn't matter when I stream. You decide you're gonna walk all over my desk. Excuse you. Come sit in my lap. Come on. Okay, I love you too. Excuse you. Come on. Cat? Yes? In my lap? No. My gosh. See, that's why I can't have you on here, because you're clicking buttons on my mouse and keyboard, and no, stay there. Thank you. It was a cold morning, perfectly suited for my morose mood. The streets were thick with fog, and though the lamps flickered, the light could not quite penetrate through the gloom. It almost felt, as I walked alongside my mother, that I were traversing the bottom of an ocean. The people we passed, in their thick coats and mufflers, did not seem to be other human beings, but fish. Yeah, no, I wasn't talking to Jack. I was talking to my cat. He wouldn't be that rude. At least. Unless he was trying to mess with me. But that's different. The maids let me... What was that? What was that little meow? I'm going to make sure my mic isn't mute. Yeah, okay, we're good. Yep, there you go. Get comfortable. The maids let me into Lady Whittier's room because they knew how close we had been, and there I saw her, still and lifeless, but strangely peaceful. I know it's a cliche, but she could have been asleep. I wished dearly that she was. I half allowed myself to believe, if I could have taken her violin and played her favorite song, she would have sat up in bed and smiled at me. But that was not to be. I was 14, much too old for such fancies. When people die, they have a depressing tendency to remain dead. It's scientifically proven. Not even galvanished frogs truly return from the grave. Their twitching is simply a result of the electricity running through their bodies. Lady Whittier did not stir, even when I held her hand for the last time, now completely cool, and pressed a kiss against her withered old cheek. So, Lady Whittier was dead, and my mother was once more out of a job, and I was horribly, dreadfully alone. It felt like a real physical ache, as though there was a thorn buried inside my chest. No matter what I did, I couldn't get it out. There was, however, one small consolation. Lady Whittier left me her violin. She included me in her will, though I wasn't a blood relation and no true granddaughter of hers. Our lack of familial ties did not lessen her affections towards me. I was her dear Tawa, her peach blossom, who had afforded her so much happiness in her old age, as though she had little money, and though she had little money left, what money she did have went to her son, Ambrose. She could at least bequeath me with her most cherished possession, the delightful violin her father had bought in Cremona all those years ago. And that was not the only thing. Lady Whittier also wrote me a letter. Her handwriting was faint and spidery, as her hands had frozen with sickness and old age combined, but I could read it regardless. She knew my mother and I would be in need of money, and, if I felt it necessary, I could sell her violin. It has a great deal of sentimental worth to me, but I suppose that will no longer matter when I am dead and gone. Sell it if you must. You should fetch a pretty penny for it, and you and your mother should no longer need to worry about monetary concerns. But there was more. I have also been making arrangements for you during the past few months. I knew my end was approaching, and I wished to ensure you were cared for as best as I could. I do not have too many connections. My dearly departed husband was better at making enemies than friends, but I have a passing familiarity with the Leonard family in Shropshire. Louisa Leonard and I are related. She is my niece, and I believe she has been looking for a parlor maid for quite some time. Unfortunately, or fortunately perhaps, she is also rather picky, and the process has been taking a long time. I told Louisa I had met with the most extraordinary young girl, with grace and dignity most suited for the role, and she seemed interested in making your acquaintance. If you are in need of a job, I am sure Louisa would be only too happy to accommodate you. The wages would be higher than that of a mere scullery maid, and you would have room and board. Louisa has always been a touch obsessed with the exotic, shall we say, and I imagine she will like you, being so pretty and unusual. I fear she will see you as something mildly diverting, rather than the intelligent young woman that you are, but it would not be too taxing a job. In any event, you should do what you think is best. I want to see you flourish in the future, my little peach blossom. You have done so much for me, in your own way, though you may not realize it, and I just want to return the favor. In English place names are pronounced more like sheer. Shropshire? Oh, okay. Another weird English thing to know. Thank you. Appreciated.